It was actually very good. An old guy who was a mentor for me once said, he said to me, Chris, there's two things you never sell. He said, never sell your children, even if you might want to sometimes. But he said, never sell your land. He said, your job in life is to buy land, buy as much as you can buy. And when you can afford more, buy more. And he said, never, ever let it go. Hang on to your knuckles are raw. And it was good advice. In hindsight, I wish I'd taken it back at about 15 when he told me.
Yeah. And the point about being 15 is a good one too. Start young. I mean, that's probably been my biggest mistake. I didn't start soon enough. But if you start young and start accumulating, you know, you've got so many options as you get older. You're not that much older. A lot of people talk about wanting to sort of retire early. I tend to think people like that are people who don't like their jobs very much.
Okay.
But you know, for a lot of people, that's the goal: retire early and have that option. If you start young enough and you've got the right philosophy, like accumulate good assets, then you can do that.
Yeah, that's right. So retirement really is based on how early you start. If you don't start early enough, then you're pushing your retirement options out a little further. We get that sometimes. We get people at 55, 60 say, hey, we think we need to get into investing to get retired, and while you can do something with them, you're never ever going to have the same opportunities that you will if you're starting at 25, 30. And there's so much more room for markets to move, and you've got so much more time for things to work.
You don't have to be earning huge incomes either. I mean, one of my mentoring clients is a guy, he's 35, he's an electrician, so he's just an employed electrician. He earns reasonably good money, but he's not earning, you know, 200 grand a year or anything like that. But he started early, and now he's got 7 properties in portfolio, and he's now looking for his 8th. So, you know, he's well down a path, and you know, he's got good assets too. He's bought affordable stuff in good locations with growth drivers. You know, a lot of people think you've got to buy prime, prestige, expensive property, and it's just a fallacy. He's just bought basic, affordable, well located stuff that ticks all the basic boxes. And now he's got 7 of them, looking for his 8th. And he's 35, and he's just really well set up. He's got options. You know, when he's in his 40s, he's probably got the option of retiring early.
That's really awesome.
This quote says, I buy assets on the basis that they close the share market for 5 years. I don't care, because I wasn't planning to sell anyway. I'm buying something that I'm going to keep forever. So I'm not about trading, I'm about buying good assets and keeping them and just accumulating. It's worked pretty well.
One of the questions we often get asked is people, you know, when they're sitting with us, they go, oh yeah, but surely capital growth can't keep going. I mean, properties have increased now, because surely there's a ceiling. And you and I have an answer there. What's your answer there? What would you say to people when they say, can properties keep increasing in value, and why do they keep increasing in value?
Well, good property does, not all property does. And that's the thing, you can't assume that all property grows in value, but that's why you need to buy property that's well located and ticks certain boxes, you know, and it's not rocket science. Close to all the things that people want to be close to, like public transport and schools and shopping, jobs nodes, but you know, property that has all those basic qualities does just keep on steadily over time growing in value. And the like the 20-year figures from sources like CoreLogic show that, you know, Melbourne on average has increased 270% over 20 years. Most of the major cities have done at least 200% or, you know, 190% over, which means that they've almost trebled in value. There are always phases when the market's down, but over time it keeps on performing because, you know, people's incomes rise as well.
The matter of Mackay, so sometimes when we talk to Mackay investors and say to them, all right, we're going to look at buying your investment property in Mackay, and they roll their eyes and they go, oh my gosh, yes, but you know, all my friends lost so much money in Mackay, why would I come back and, you know, invest in Mackay? Wouldn't that happen again? What would you say to those people?
I understand their fears, but I think what's important is what's changing. Mackay is not a static place. What's changing about Mackay? It's the same where I live in the Sunshine Coast. There was a time when you wouldn't have invested there either, because it was a tourism economy and it just wasn't a growth market, because tourism economies tend not to be. But it's diversified. It's diversified through proactive action the local council and through big infrastructure spending, and suddenly it's a whole different ball game. It's a much broader economy, stronger. It's become a serious player, and I see that happening in Mackay as well. It used to be essentially about connections with the mining sector, but now it's more than that. It's also got agribusiness, it's got tourism, it's got logistics, it's got construction, and now recently a new industry in aviation by steering the Qantas Pilot Academy. That's a big thing for Mackay because it creates a whole new industry. It means that next time the resources sector takes a bit of a pause, you've got these other things happening that are going to keep jobs strong, because that single thing, that event, is going to create, according to what we're told, 2,000 or 3,000 jobs for Mackay.
That's a lot of jobs.
Yeah, so I think things are changing so that Mackay is less likely now to have those big peaks and troughs that it had in the past.
Yeah, there's still a strong argument that we may end up in a bit of a shortage and may see escalating prices, like we did last time if it's not managed. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, Mackay does tend towards shortage right now, and we're seeing the rental market pretty strong. Vacancies, according to a number of sources, are around about 1.5%, which is very low, and we're hearing from people at the coalface that they advertise a property for rental and they get 20 applications and people offering more than the asking rent to secure it. So that indicates a strong market that's got a bit of a shortage. Man, I think it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, because Mackay seems to be at the beginning of a growth phase.
Yeah.
And there's more growth to come, so there's an opportunity there for investors and developers to do something about that.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, apartments versus houses. I mean, how important, obviously some people love their apartments, some people hate them. I came from a background where I absolutely hated them, and recently I've got involved with them and seen some benefits if they're scarce enough. But what's your view, apartments versus detached dwellings and townhouses?
Yeah, I mean, the dominant paradigm in real estate is that it's about the land, isn't it? The land content. And historically, houses on land have grown more in value than apartments, as a general statement. It's not always the case, and as you say, scarcity can be a mitigating factor. What I think is significant is that there are demographic changes that I think are going to be pushing people more towards it. I think the paradigm's going to switch a bit. We've got an aging population we've got a lot of downsizers. Older people moving out of the 4-bedroom family home, and they want to move to a townhouse or an apartment because it's for all sorts of obvious reasons. Then you've got younger adults, young Australians, who don't really want a house in the burbs on a quarter-acre block. They don't want to spend their weekends mowing and weeding. They prefer the apartment lifestyle. So that's another demographic trend. And then you've got the reality that a lot of Australia's population growth comes from overseas migrants coming from parts of the world where living in attached dwellings is the norm. That's what they're accustomed to. So you've got all those trends pushing people more and more towards apartments as by choice. And that's why I think we've had, in the last several years, we've had such a lot of construction of new apartments across Australia, more so than houses on land, because the demographic shifts are dictating that. So I think over time that paradigm will change a little bit. Personally, I'm still going to go for houses on land, but you can see that the dynamic's shifting a bit.
Yeah, well, the majority of what I have myself personally is also house and lands, and if the apartments are scarce enough and well priced enough and unrepeatable, then I'll look at them. But if they're repeatable and there's an abundance of land around them and you can just keep replicating them, we tend not to be interested either.
Yeah, no, the big
doesn't mean we're not interested.
The big high-rise with the generic apartments aren't so attractive, but there are boutique apartment blocks with a bit of character, a bit of scarcity factor or point of difference about them. Those are the ones to go for, I think.
And size matters in that case.
Yeah,
very good.
You've been doing what you do for a while. I mean, as I do, that a lot of people out there who want to be investors, they make classic mistakes. What are some of the biggest ones that they make that people could they'll get a better outcome if they avoid making these mistakes.
I think first following the media and the heated markets. So I think overheated markets are dangerous.
Yeah.
So buying at the right point in the cycle is absolutely critical. Timing. I mean, if you've got time in is way more important than timing. Having the right amount of time. So if you're 20 years in anything, I mean, my partner's a hairdresser, and she said there's 3 weeks between a good and bad haircut, and in property there's 10 years between a good and bad property. But ultimately, if you want it to perform from the get-go and stay performing, the best you haven't had the haircut for a while.
No, it's more like 50 years between haircuts.
50 between yourself. Bad example. But for when it comes to property, buying, you want a property that you buy at the right point in the cycle, that is at the bottom of the cycle and on the way up.
Yeah.
And then next time it turns, they're always going to go up and down, but hopefully the downside will be less than where you bought it, and you'll never be able to negative equity.
Yeah,
that's the first one.
You're right about the point about people following media. That's a mistake a lot of people make. By the time you read there's a boom on in media, it's probably 1 to 2 years too late to buy in that market. You should have bought 2 years earlier.
Yeah. And
that's what we try and do with hotspotting, is identify those areas before, long before they make the media.
Yeah. Because
media is just reacting to changes in median prices, which means the growth's already happened, or at least half of it's already happened. So they need, I think people need to have better sources of information. And one of the things I think you could probably comment on this as well is that a big mistake people make is a lack of willingness to spend money on good advice. They want to skimp and save on that. Yeah, we'll spend $500,000 on buying the property, but we won't spend a few thousand on getting good advice.
Yeah.
And that's where they come a cropper.
We've seen some horror cases, and unfortunately I've had a lot been involved helping with insolvency cases sometimes, more to help them sell the end product. But the case where you get the do-it-yourselfer who buys 5 properties in the same market, that all break down at the same time, at the heat of the cycle, and or they go out and buy 3 or 4 in Moranbah in the middle of the heat, chasing big rents.
I know people have done that. I've got a client who needs help. How can I get out of this mess? She bought 5 properties. They're all in Gladstone and Moranbah.
Yeah. So we tend to think diversification. One of the other things, and it's one of the oldest sayings, is don't put all your eggs in one basket. I ask people, what does that mean? And they go, actually, we don't even know where the saying came from, but everyone knows it. And yet I see so few people in investing actually do it. So, I've met cases where a gentleman had 12 properties in the one suburb, and he knew that suburb and he knew it very, very well. But when it went down, he went down with it. Now, if those 12 properties have been spread across, say, even 5 completely separate economies, and we're talking about investing in diversification in economies. So diversifying doesn't mean, well, I'm going to go to Moranbah, then I'm going to go out to, the town down the road. That's also a coal town. It means diversifying into multiple economies, and trying to be into multiple property cycles, because as I mainly from reading your stuff in particular, we get that when one market's booming, the other one might be tanking. But if you've got a good cross section, if something's not working at the time, generally something else is picking up the slack.
Yeah, so you've always got something in your portfolio that's performing for you.
And the general trend is up.
Yeah. The question I get asked more than any other is, when's Gladstone going to recover? There's so many investors that make mistakes by buying not just one but several properties in that market. They didn't get good advice. Yeah. And I think the big mistake people often make as well is that once they've bought something, they stop researching. They don't stay tuned in. So by the time they find out that the Gladstone market's trending down, and it's too late for them to sell, so they're stuck. So it's that lack of willingness to go and consult an expert and maybe spend a bit of money with them, so you can avoid making all those mistakes. That's where a lot of people come a cropper.
Yeah, knowledge is power, and in this game, knowledge is power. Where's the population coming? Where's the infrastructure? Where's the jobs? And knowing that is why we buy your reports, and that's why we think most of our clients get good information, because we're prepared to A, do the research ourselves, and B, invest in good information through sources like yourselves.
Yeah. I think it's smart. I mean, the most successful investor I know, one of our regular premium member clients, he's based in Sydney. He's got his own corporate training business, and his second business is property investment. He treats it as a business. He's got close to 40 properties now.
Wow.
He doesn't have to work, but he likes what he does. But he treats property investment as a business, and he's surrounded himself with highly credentialed experts in their various fields, with the people experts in finance, depreciation. He uses us for research, but he's willing to spend money on that, and that's why he's been so successful. He's willing to spend money to make money, but most people aren't.
Yeah, well, that's another saying, isn't it? Penny wise, pound foolish.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, that can cost you a lot of money. Do it yourself. We see is often a tragedy. Is often a tragedy. Listening to the uncle, the local real estate agent who means well.
Well, you can do it yourself, but you do it yourself in a way where you're willing to tap into advice and information sources. The word I hear most often from people starting out is overwhelmed, and the same word keeps coming at me from people. They're overwhelmed by the whole process. They don't know enough about it, and they don't know how to get started. They're also overwhelmed by the number of choices, because Australia's a big country. Where do we buy? There's so many options, and we just don't know how to even begin to narrow down the options. So a lot of people out there are suffering from overwhelm, and I think the solution is to get good advice and be willing to pay for it in the beginning. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that because they've thought about saving a deposit and what it's going to cost me to repay a loan, but they haven't budgeted for the most important thing they need to do before they do any of that, and it is to spend some money on research and advice. So they don't start out in their investing careers by making calamitous mistakes.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the other things, that when people do seek advice, they get stuck with who do I ask? So they can end up asking the real estate agent, and a real estate agent means well but can only sell what's in his backyard, and he's not likely to say, sorry, don't buy here right now because the market's not good. He'll want to sell you something in his backyard. So while real estate's very good at their profession and a necessary profession, they may not be the best people to advise you when it comes to property investing. So good advice, finding good advice and finding that up in the internet. The internet's also a minefield full of marketers trying to promote their seller and products. So trying to find good independent buyers agents or good independent coaches that don't have a self-interest in selling you their own developments, I think also is important.
Yeah, it really is. People need to understand where the vested interests lie. Who's paying the person who's giving you advice? That's an important question to ask.
Yeah. So often people ask me, should I invest in a small mining town that's got these huge rental returns? What are the pros and cons of investing in, say, Port Hedland or Moranbah?
Look, I think when you're buying in those markets, it's a little bit different from mainstream real estate. I think the standard philosophy I would advocate is you buy good assets and you keep them long term, whereas with some of those more volatile mining town markets, it might be more a case of timing your entry and your exit. If you get that right, you can do really well. A place like Port Hedland, I mean, the buying is really good. I mean, it used to be a median price of $1 million, and now it's more like 300,000. But it's on the rise again. So now could be an opportune time to get into that market, but always very mindful that there come a point where it might be good to sell, which is kind of different from a mainstream investment. But I don't see a point where a Port Hedland or a Karratha is going to be any different. It's always going to be very much hooked into the resources sector, so it's going to be more volatile then. And people who have got some experience, they've got a portfolio. You can fit a Port Hedland into a bigger portfolio, but I wouldn't recommend it for someone starting out with their first one.
We often do that with some of the sophisticated investors that can afford to take that risk, where we might say, okay, this is no more than 20% of your asset base. We know the timing's good, but we have an intention to collect the positive gearing, the extra rent, because there's significantly positive geared, up to 12% positive geared. And that will help gear their portfolio up. But we know the volatility of it and the danger in it, and we will watch that market. And as soon as it starts to look a little too hot, or if the construction starts to soothe off out the back, we'll tap out, take our profit and run.
Yeah, because those sorts of places tend to not fulfil the general criteria you'd recommend to people, which is one of which is diversity of economy, different strands to the economy. It's one of the things I'm liking about Mackay and the Sunshine Coast. They're diversifying and becoming stronger as a result, whereas some of those mining related areas will always be one industry type markets. So you've got to understand that and behave accordingly.